Hello everybody, it's Jen, Scrapbena Creations. I'm so excited to be joining the video design team for Trinity Stamps, and it is release day for the fall release. We're going to make 2 cards today using the Autumn Forest Friends stamp set and the coordinating dies. Now if you purchase the dies, they will come packaged similar to the stamp. I just received some of the earlier versions without the packaging. So as always, we are going to jump into the coloring. I've stamped out a number of the images that I'm going to be using, or what I originally thought I might be using and didn't end up using. So for example, I'm not going to show you the coloring of the wagon because I don't end up using that. And I will bring in some more of the leaves and foliage from this stamp set for the second card. But for now, we're going to start with coloring the pumpkin. I'm doing a 3 color blend with the pumpkin. My darkest is YR18, my midtone is YR68, and then my lightest is Y38. Now I'm doing my darkest shading to the top and the bottom of the pumpkin here, and this will allow it to look round in shape. Now normally if we want something to look round, we would have the darkest shadows to the right and left hand side, but for pumpkins, this shading technique of having the darkest at the top and the bottom works really well for it to kind of look like it's protruding out of the front. And you'll notice there that I did add the darkest color as well to where the natural indents are vertically on the pumpkin. So you can watch me do that again here with this kind of tealy color. Now I did recently purchase some new Copics, so this is a new color combination for me that I'm trying out and I really love it. So I'm going to use a 4 color blend for this one. My darkest is BG75, and then my darkest midtone is BG72, and then I'm going to go ahead and blend that out with my lightest midtone, the BG11, leaving only a little bit of area for the lightest color or highlight color, which will be the BG10. And I really, really love this color combination for fall. Now, I really love the teal pumpkins that you can purchase. I realize you're probably not going to find a teal pumpkin out in the forest with our little autumn forest friends here, but that's the beauty of card making. We can use our imaginations and we can create things however we want. So I'm putting some of those teal pumpkins on my card today. Now you will notice that a lot of that color got pushed back, so I am going over the blue one here just for a second coat. This was the first time I used this color combination, so I was also just kind of getting used to it, seeing how the markers blended together and deciding that I definitely wanted to pull in more of those darker colors. For the second coat, I don't even use the BG10. I just simply use the BG11. I'm going to go ahead and color up the little scarf on our fox as well with those same 4 colors, just using 1 color for each of the little rectangles, and that will just tie in that teal color to another spot on the card, which is how I often like to color my images. So for this little raccoon, I typically would do a raccoon with cool grays. I know the rule is supposed to be cool grays are for things that are not alive or inanimate objects, and then anything that is breathing you would want to do in warm grays. But if I want an animal to look really black, like a black bear or a raccoon, I typically do cool grays. But because this is an autumn scene card, I really thought it was best to bring in those warm grays, and I do really love how this cute little raccoon turns out in the end. So my lightest color is the W3, and you may have noticed that I just went ahead and laid down the color everywhere where I wanted that color, the black color, to be, just so I knew where I was coloring. I find that that is sometimes the most helpful when you have, especially an animal with white on it, because it's hard to pick up any color off of a white area if you mistakenly kind of lay down some color where you don't want it to be. So the W3 is the lightest, my W5 is my lightest midtone, then the W7 for the darkest midtone, and the W9 for the darkest. And now I'm just going ahead and laying down where I want my color to be for the white. So I simply used a little bit of W5 for those larger areas, and then W3, and now I believe I'm coming in with the W1, and then I will blend that out with the colorless blender, and that will push some of that color back so that you can tell that it is meant to be white. So I just thought it would be easiest to do all that white at once, so you can see easily now where I don't want to color once I go and lay down some colors for my little friends here. So I'm going to work on the fox now, and I'm using the color combination E18, E09, E19, and then YR18. I went ahead and I laid down the YR18 where I thought I wanted my darkest shadows. So that will just help me as I go through the rest of the markers here. And really, I just want the darkest area to be where his tail meets his bottom, along his back, and then underneath his scarf and around that tuft of fur on his chest. And then I want to bring some of that darkest color to the sides of his head as well as his little nose there, bringing that up under his ears because his ears will cast a shadow. So I'm only going to leave a little bit of room here for that YR18. So this will just bring in that nice orangey color for our fox to kind of go really nicely with the reddish brown that I've chosen for the rest of him. And I am just going to do a little bit of tip to tip here. So this is the YR18 and the E19 just to have a nice smooth blend where that lightest color meets the rest of the color on his body. For the deer, I'm going to start off using E23, E33, and E53. And I just, again, laying down that lightest color, just helping map out where I want my darkest areas to be. This can be really helpful if you're new to coloring, whatever coloring medium you're using. It's often nice to go ahead and map out in your lightest color, because then it's really easy to go over with the darkest colors. So instead of starting with the darkest, where it's really hard to kind of clean that up if you make a little bit of a mistake. If you do make a mistake, you can just go ahead and color your image a little bit darker maybe than you had intended, instead of starting over, and you might find that you find a new color combination that you really like and you weren't expecting. So don't give up with mistakes. I always try my best to fix them as much as possible instead of starting over. So you can see here, I actually decided I wanted the deer to be a little bit more darker in those shadowed areas. So I'm bringing in the E25 just to darken that up a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and blend that out with the E23, and then again the E33 and the E53. And I really like the color of the deer after I brought that E25 in. So the beautiful thing about Copics is that you can go over top of them. So start off a little bit lighter, and then if you want to darken it up, then you can go ahead and do that after you have your first coat on. So for the deer's hooves, I just used W7, and I used the same color combination for the body of the hedgehog that I did for the deer. I just didn't use as much of the lightest color. For the tops of the pumpkins, I'm using E29 and E25. And here I'm just going to quickly show you the color combination I used for the red leaves, which is R89, R59, and R29. For the orange leaves, I used a similar combination from the fox. So here I'm just showing you the Trinity Stamps blending brushes. This was my first time using it, so I'm just getting used to it. I'm actually on the road for a couple weeks here, so I'm creating these cards not in my craft room, which can always be a challenge. So I packed my Distress ink mini cubes with me, so I don't have any of my Distress oxides with me. So you'll see I'm using the, is it the Evergreen Bough? No, sorry, it's the Ice Spruce Distress Mini. And just adding a little bit of that ink with the Blending Buddy by Trinity Stamps, and it's a really soft brush. I love it. I'm so used to my Amazon makeup brushes, which work perfectly fine, but the quality of the Trinity ones are fantastic. So loving those. Now, I did go ahead and adhere my little raccoon to my deer here, and now I'm just going to create a scene. I wanted that Ice Spruce Distress ink just to be really soft behind them and pick up on that tealy kind of color for the pumpkins, and the Ice Spruce actually matches those pumpkins perfectly, so it really does highlight all of the images that will be in front. So I wanted there to be some pumpkins to the back of my images, and I set that little hedgehog on top of the one pumpkin. He just looks like he was in a sitting position, so I thought that would be perfect for him. I'm just trying to get these pumpkins lined up behind our little characters here, so trying to be really careful to peel them up. I did go ahead and pop up the majority of our little forest friends here on some foam tape just so that they had some dimension, and then the pumpkins themselves will be adhered directly to the card panel. So all I have left to do is get our little fox in place, and then the other pumpkins to fill out the rest of the scene here. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the release paper for the fox. Once I get him exactly where I want him, you can see there I stuck the pumpkin to the back of him and then just added a little bit of some liquid adhesive there, so that will be exactly where I want it to be. I'm going to tuck in this teal one here to the bottom left hand side, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the final one. It'll take me a second here just to figure out where exactly I want that final pumpkin to go. I am going to move it over here to the right a little bit more, so I'll tuck that in behind, and I feel like that just balances out the height of the deer a little bit more, so I really like the placement of that kind of at the top of the pile there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this panel out with a stitched rectangle die. You will notice I was a little bit over to the right in where I adhered my images. I tend to do that. I typically am off-centered one way or the other when I'm making a scene. So this rectangle die just cuts slightly smaller than an A2 size card. So you can see here now I have both of the sides evenly matched up. So for the sentiment I'm just showing you, I used one of the new release sentiment stamps called a Latte Love, and I stamped the sentiment Warmest Wishes, which I think went perfectly, especially seeing our little fox has a scarf on. Now this would have been really pretty heat embossed with some gold embossing powder, but unfortunately I didn't bring that with me, so I couldn't do that. So simply just stamping the sentiment on to my panel. Now I'm just doing some final touches here with a black glaze pen. So this kind of gives a raised embossed effect. So I'm just doing their noses and some spots on the deer. I did go ahead and add some white gel pen prior to putting the images on. And there's card number 1. So for card number 2, we're going to use the stamps a little bit differently. I wanted to show you how versatile this stamp set could actually be. So I'm going to make a Thanksgiving wreath, and if you've been watching me for a while, you know that I enjoy using smaller stamps from a stamp set to make wreaths. I recently did one for Not Too Shabby, and then I've done one before for a card kit, I believe. But this time I got a little bit smarter. Normally I just go ahead and lay all my images down onto my card panel, but when I was thinking about doing this card, I thought, what if I went ahead and cut out my own little background for the wreath using some circle dies. So I simply got out my infinity dies and used 2 different sizes so that I could cut out this little panel for my wreath. It almost reminds me of like if you're making an actual wreath and you go to Michael's and you buy the styrofoam that you can like push everything into. I feel like this is the same sort of thing. It gives you a guide to ensure that your wreath ends up circular. So this was a new kind of tryout for me, and I loved the way it worked. It just kind of gave me that template, and you can see here it's almost perfectly circular. So I will definitely be trying that one again. So to make this a fall wreath, I wanted to add the pumpkins. So I went ahead and used one of the tall, skinny pumpkins and one of the shorter, wider pumpkins. I love that they included both sizes of pumpkins because I feel like you're either more favorable towards the tall pumpkins or the shorter ones. Growing up, my brother always chose the long, tall ones. Well, long and tall is the same thing. So the tall ones. And I always loved the little round pumpkin. So kind of brought back some childhood memories while I was making this particular card. I thought there for a moment that I might add another pumpkin to the wreath, but then decided that was just crowding that space too much. I did want to pull the pumpkins up a little bit more so you could see more of the bottom. So I'm just kind of fixing the placement of those. You can see there's a little bit of a gap there underneath where those two pumpkins meet. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that with adding some further detailed elements to the wreath itself. So I'm using some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock today. I just went ahead and corner rounded the corners there using my old school Creative Memories corner punch, which I love and will never get rid of unless it breaks. And so now I'm just going to go ahead and add some more of the decorative elements to fill out this wreath here. So I did add some foam tape to the back of the wreath and the pumpkins. So they're raised off of the card itself. And now I'm going to go ahead and add some of these leaves and sprigs to the back of the pumpkins here to fill in some of that space. And I'm going to use my art glitter glue, which is just the most amazing liquid adhesive in my opinion. I'm obsessed with this stuff ever since I bought it. But I do love this glue, and so I'll just add the rest of the elements to the card using my liquid glue with no further foam tape so that they're nice and flush. So there are some really adorable images in this stamp set. The acorn, and then there's some mushrooms. So I'm going to go ahead and add some of those to the wreath as well. So for the first round, I just wanted to get the leaves down. And then once I got it on the card base here, I could add the other elements. So here's where I'm trying to close the gap where those pumpkins no longer meet with the leaves. So I'm going to use this little mushroom here. And I'm just going to tuck him behind the leaf so it just pops out a little. And then I'm going to add a few of the tiny mushrooms around the wreath as well. So I think that looks really adorable. Just adding those finishing touches with the acorns and the mushrooms. So I love the bright pops of color with the red and the orange and a little bit of the yellow with those kind of muted browns for the autumn scene. Now for the sentiment, I'm bringing in the new release sentiment stamp called Autumn Sentiments. So you notice here I've had to stamp this out a couple times. I'm using this was a pre-made card base that I had with me, and it's got a little bit of a gloss on it. And you'll remember I said I'm not at home, and for some reason I forgot to bring normal cardstock. And I hate using my premium cardstock for coloring on sentiments. So it's not the stamp or the ink that's made me have had to do this sentiment 3 times. It was the actual paper. So no big deal. Stamped it a few times there, finally got it how I wanted it, and then I used a banner die to make sure that my little fishtails were nice and even. And then I'm going to go ahead and adhere the banner to my card base with some foam tape again, so it's the same level as the wreath. And then I wanted to add a couple of those elements to the right hand side of the banner. So I just chose one of the leaves and then the little acorn, and I love how that brings some of those decorations from the wreath into the banner and just create some continuity in the card. So I'm just going to finish up here with the white gel pen. So I'm adding some white dots to the tops of the mushrooms, and then I am going to add some highlights to the acorn and also the pumpkin. So this will help round out the pumpkins as well. I thought for a minute about adding some to the leaves and then thought it looked fine just the way it was. So there's the second card complete. I'm going to show you a close-up here of the wreath. Then I will go ahead and show you another close-up of the first card we made. So make sure to check back for some more videos using the new release from Trinity Stamps. There's a hop going on, so make sure to check the information down below in the description box for how you can hop along and see the other projects by the design team. So thanks everybody for watching. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you really soon. Take care. Bye.